Morning glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. Greetings to the world listening to the Hugh Hewitt Show this morning. I am Hugh. I am glad to be speaking with you. Did you have as strange an Easter as we did? It was a great day. He is risen. He is risen indeed. But ours was a Zoom Easter, bringing in family from many different states to have a nice long, hour-long celebration of the Paschal Mystery and just enjoy each other's company on a beautiful spring day. It is now, of course, raining like crazy in the District of Columbia with storms waking me up at 4:30 in the morning. But that's okay. Means I don't have to run today. I've just got to mention, though, I did 12 miles on Saturday. 12 miles. Just saying, relieffactor.com works. Anyway, here's the bad news. We are at 20,457 deaths in America, and we have 526,391 cases. So 20,457 deaths, 526,000 cases in America. Now that's a pretty brutal set of numbers. Worldwide, there have been 109,000 recorded deaths and 1,857,000 cases of diagnosed COVID. But this does not account for the burgeoning epidemic in South America and Africa. Places like Ecuador, which are just slammed, just terribly slammed, are not going to show up. But a lot of experts believe America has peaked, at least for this time. A second wave may come. We will see. OPEC, Russia, the United States, Mexico, all the small oil producers below us all agreed yesterday. And there's an output deal. Thus far, it's not registering in the market. Oil has faltered this morning. In fact, let me bring you the pre-market report or the market report brought to you by Birch Gold. I have been telling you for a very long time, you ought to diversify. And if you had diversified, you'd be very happy right now because gold is at $1,740 an ounce. If you want to learn about diversification of gold, including part of your IRA or 401k, you go text my name, Hugh, H-U-G-H, to 474747. Right, that's pretty easy. HUGH to 474747. They will teach you how to roll over all or a portion of your IRA. I don't believe in 100% in anything. I believe in diversification. But Birch Gold you can trust. They physically hold your gold and they will tell you how to do it. No hardcore sales approach. If you want to buy gold, you can do it from Birch Gold. Go to hughgold.com. I bought physical gold from Birch in December. Might buy more, but I am diversified, and I believe in being diversified. So if you are one of those investors who have not yet taken that step to put 10, 20, 30% of your portfolio into precious metals, Birch Gold via Hugh, texted to 474747. The England and German indexes are open, and they are up. England is up almost 3%. Germany is up 2.25%. Futures in the United States are red, but we don't know how the market will do today, and we have no idea what oil will do. It's up a little bit right now at $23.10 a barrel, but it should gently but increasingly rise as production falls. Other headlines, a drug company, just a great story in the New York Times on how a group of people at Biogen, one of America's great drug companies, turned out to be super spreaders of the virus. They got together for their annual meeting at an elite healthcare conference in Boston. And they got together and they all turned out to have COVID and they all took it all over the country. Not so good. Big story in the New York Times yesterday. Joe Biden has been credibly accused, of a former Senate staffer of sexual assault. You can read all about Tara Reade's allegations. There will be more coming on that. Some doctors are moving away from ventilators for virus patients. That is a big headline from NBC News. Because, of course, everyone's been running around trying to, desperately, organized by Jared Kushner and others, produce new ventilators. Well, if the ventilators don't work, if they make it worse, not better, you have to worry about that, and you have to be aware of that, even the sunk cost, all right? If you were wrong, you were wrong. There's nothing you can do about being wrong, but you can stop being wrong and not be victim of I spent so much time building these ventilators, I've got to use them. No, that's called sunk costs. Boris Johnson emerged from the hospital. I want you to hear what he had to say. It's so moving. We'll let the rest of the news wait. This is Boris Johnson, cut number 5 yesterday.
You're welcome.
Now to my political panel.
No, cut number 5. Cut number 5.
Good afternoon.
I've today left hospital after a week in which the NHS has saved my life, no question. It's hard to find words to express my debt, but before I come to that, I want to thank everyone in the entire UK for the effort and the sacrifice you have made and are making. When the sun is out and the kids are at home, when the whole natural world seems at its loveliest and the outdoors is so inviting, I can only imagine how tough it has been to follow the rules on social distancing. I thank you because so many millions and millions of people across this country have been doing the right thing. Millions going through the hardship of self-isolation, faithfully, patiently, and with thought and care for others as well as for themselves. I want you to know that this Easter Sunday, I do believe that your efforts are worth it and are daily proving their worth. Because although we mourn every day those who are taken from us in such numbers, and though the struggle is by no means over, we are now making progress in this incredible national battle against coronavirus. A fight we never picked against an enemy we still don't entirely understand. We're making progress in this national battle because the British public formed a human shield around this country's greatest national asset, our National Health Service. We understood and we decided that if together we could keep our NHS safe, if we could stop our NHS from being overwhelmed, then we could not be beaten, and this country would rise together and overcome this challenge as we have overcome so many challenges in the past. In the last 7 days, I have, of course, seen the pressure that the NHS is under. I've seen the personal courage, not just of the doctors and nurses, but of everyone, the cleaners, the cooks, the healthcare workers of every description, physios, radiographers, pharmacists, who have kept coming to work, kept putting themselves in harm's way, kept risking this deadly virus. It is thanks to that courage, that devotion, that duty, and that love that our NHS has been unbeatable. I want to pay my own thanks to the utterly brilliant doctors, leaders in their fields, men and women, but several of them for some reason called Nick, who took some crucial decisions a few days ago, for which I will be grateful for the rest of my life. I want to thank the many nurses, men and women, whose care has been so astonishing. I'm going to forget some names, so please forgive me, but I want to thank Poling and Shannon and Emily and Angel and Connie and Becky and Rachel and Nikki and Anne. And I hope they won't mind if I mention in particular 2 nurses who stood by my bedside for 48 hours when things could have gone either way. They're Jenny from New Zealand, Invercargill on the South Island to be exact, and Luis from Portugal near Porto. And the reason in the end my body did start to get enough oxygen was because for every second of the night they were watching and they were thinking and they were caring and making the interventions I needed. So that is how I also know that across this country, 24 hours a day, for every second of every hour, there are hundreds of thousands of NHS staff who are acting with the same care and thought and precision as Jenny and Luis. That is why we will defeat this coronavirus and defeat it together. We will win because our NHS is the beating heart of this country. It is the best of this country. It is unconquerable. It is powered by love.
That is Boris Johnson thanking the British people. It was very inspiring. When we come back, we talk about President Trump has got the highest ratings of his presidency. As Americans rally to the idea we're all in this together, I will talk more with you. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Stay tuned on this Monday edition of the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you in part by Job Creators Network.
Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. You might think that's because Boris Johnson said the NIH is powered by love, but you would be wrong. Good morning. It's Monday, another week of quarantine. I'm so glad to be here with you, picking up thousands of listeners by the hour, new affiliates. It's great. Welcome to the Hugh Hewitt Show. We're upbeat here, but we also bring you the news. Look, while I'm in quarantine, fetching Mrs. Hewitt and I, we pick movies to watch. She is captive of British foils war. I am myself going back through movies I haven't seen in a long time, and that is the opening song in a movie, which you can guess. You can tweet at me at Hugh Hewitt if you figured it out. I play the soundtrack of the movie that I watch. That's it. There's your clue. Terrific flick. Called my boys last night and said, you got to watch this movie. Neither of them had seen this movie. Anyway, I have a new column in the Washington Post, which is racking up hundreds. It's over 1,300 comments now. I'm sure they're all positive. Churchill's lessons for Trump and for us. It begins. President Trump is doing a good job of leading the country through this pandemic. All right, that first line was enough to set off a few 100,000 people, but that's okay. President Trump is doing a good job of leading the country through this pandemic. It is possible to play a parlor game of what might have been. It might be President Mitt Romney's last year in office and Vice President Paul Ryan leading the task force, but for Hurricane Sandy or Candy Crowley's infamous intervention in the 2012 debate. Or President Hillary Clinton might be at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, had cable news not so lavishly devoted time to Trump. Certainly certain of his inability to win in 2016. But to borrow from Don Rumsfeld, you go to battle with a pandemic with the president you have, and we have a good one for this moment. This observation jars his critics, I write in the Post, and outrages those who feel hate for him, but at least half the country agrees. Indeed, that's just a fact based on the Fox poll. This is a challenge unique in American history, and there has arrived at precisely the right moment, a new book designed to drive home how right it is that Trump stick to his daily briefings and that he continue to emphasize the prospects of victory over what he calls the invisible enemy. Rarely is a book meant at times so fortuitously as Eric Larson's new The Splendid and the Vile, a saga of Churchill family and defiance during the Blitz. No, Trump is not taking on Churchillian quality. Winston Churchill was unique. But the dizzying pace at which Britain found itself engulfed by war and then thrown back, first in France and then in the Blitz, is a dramatic reminder of dire challenges past that were overcome. Throughout the early months of disaster, defeat, and retreat, Churchill insisted that everyone in his cabinet, in the country really, choose to put on confidence and resolve like an overcoat. Even when gloomy, and he often was, or waspish, snappish, and impossible to please, and it seems like a daily occurrence in Eric Larson's account, Churchill knew his audiences were many in Britain, across the empire, in America's ambivalent White House and Congress, and of course in Berlin. Whenever Trump embarks on his briefings, remind yourself of his many audiences and that President Xi Jinping engages in no such back and forth. And as General Secretary of the Chinese Communist Party is very much opposed to the idea of a free press, much less to the idea of dueling with the Jim Acostas and Yamichel Sindors of Beijing. There are none. Bravo to the journalists who assail Trump, and bravo to the president who brushes them aside when he feels their questions are unnecessarily laden with gloom or fear. The president's best moments are when he praises political foes like Andrew Cuomo and Gavin Newsom, who have proved adept allies in this extraordinary war with the virus. His worst moments are when he attacks any American. The cable networks that are not carrying every minute of every briefing are committing a horrific error by censoring news much of Americans want, if only so they can be mad at it. The decision not to carry briefings is so astonishing that it will be recognized as a low point in the history of, quote, journalism as a craft, or at a minimum, a marker of that craft's evolution from the news business into a ratings-driven entertainment cabal. I'll continue this after the break. There are 4 more graphs, but I want you to go over to WashingtonPost.com, go to the landing page. Don't read the comments. Never read the comments. They're full of nuts and Chinese communist propagandists and bots. But go and read the column and send it around. Trump is doing a good job, and we've got to stay positive and focused on good news. That's because that's how you win wars, not by defeatism. I'll be right back on The Hugh Hewitt Show.
Portions of The Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you in part by No Safe Spaces.
Welcome back, America. Hugh Hewitt inside the Beltway this morning where the thunderstorms broke early and people got up early, not earlier than Mike Allen, who is, of course, at Axios AM. I've gotten mine. I do not have my Axios AM yet this morning, Mike Allen. With whom do I lodge my complaint? Oh, it just got sent to me.
You came to the top. You came to the top as you always do, Hugh. At the top of our Axios AM, we've got a couple things. One, reporting by Jonathan Swan, showing that the Trump campaign thinks that a massive vulnerability for Vice President Biden is his stance on China. And they're already up with ads about Biden is soft on China. Look for more of that. Second, and you all be very interested in your view of this, at the top of Axios AM, we point to the president's retweet of the time to fire Fauci tweet. And what kind of a signal that could be to Dr. Anthony Fauci?
Interesting. I just got my Axios AM, which people ought to get in the morning. I had seen the retweet earlier. I never put anything into a retweet because retweets are not endorsements. I think the president is signaling that this is interesting, that there's this anti-Fauci movement out there. It would be a disaster for him to in any way remove Tony Fauci, Deborah Birx, Dr. Adams, any of his medical team. I have a column in the Post this morning, Mike, about how his briefings are becoming staples of the American media diet. Shame on the networks that are not carrying every minute of them, even though they can critique them to their heart's desire before and afterwards, but they ought to carry every minute of them. And have found, I don't know if you've read Eric Larson's brand new book yet on The Splendid and the Vile about Churchill after he became prime minister the first year during the Blitz, Dunkirk, etc. Have you had a chance to pick that up yet, Mike? Mike Allen's legendarily fallible iPhone is failing us right now. You've got to move around, Mike, in your tiny little sequestered space. Go walk to the other side of the room. Better yet, America, if we hang up and try him back. Meanwhile, I will read to you number 3. Michelle Obama to push absentee voting amid coronavirus. Fine. I don't think that's going to move a lot of people towards absentee voting. A lot of us have already adopted it. Then we've got Eastern America 2020, a lot of great pictures. A world lockdown and drowning in oil. Year over year, global oil demand is down 22%. That's absolutely true. Stat du jour. Oh, you're back. I'm up to number 6 now, Mike Allen. 70 coronavirus vaccine in development globally, with 3 already being tested in human trials. I emphasized in my Washington Post column, I think it's important for people to get good news every day like that, Mike. How often are you looking for good news versus the death toll?
No, every single day, look for signs of the American spirit and look for real information. People don't want happy talk. They do want data. And that's why we pointed to that Bloomberg story with the World Health Organization saying 70 vaccines being worked on. And I think it's important to keep some perspective. So Axios AM, Axios PM usually end with one helpful thing. That is someone who's doing something out there to try to raise a little light in the darkened world, or just simply a smile. So at the end of Axios AM today, we have one smile to go, and this is American ingenuity. In Sonoma, they're doing virtual wine tasting. So you order a kit, and you can taste along, just like people are working out along with celebrities and trainers.
It's a great idea, and I have noticed in our neck of the woods in Northern Virginia, a lot of restaurants have adopted to takeout, drive-by curbside delivery. They actually come out and put it in your car, that you never touch them. They take very good care of the food not to touch it. They put it in the back of your car. Are you using curbside pickup, Mike Allen?
I walk up, and another thing we've seen in my neighborhood in Roslyn, right across from the Key Bridge from Georgetown, is there's one restaurant that's offering a family-style meal, uncooked pasta. And there's a story out this morning about how restaurants, again, this is American ingenuity, restaurants increasingly are offering groceries to people or fixings. And I was talking to Jim Vandehui's brother, Johnny B, in Oshkosh, Wisconsin, and he was telling me that in Oshkosh, you can get the fixings for cocktails delivered. So they'll either deliver the actual cocktail or they will give you the booze and the mix and whatever else you need.
That is a brilliant idea because Whole Foods, as you know, has now limited you to certain delivery windows. Everyone is changing. And I think the big untold story of this that has nothing to do with the death toll or the virus, which we grieve and report on hourly, but the economy is changing in a accelerated pace towards Amazon, Target, Walmart, Costco. I read a fascinating analysis yesterday that in 2 months, the change in consumerism habits of acquisition of their basic goods and their surplus goods has changed at a rate of at least 5 years. So that, believe it or not, Amazon, Target, Walmart, and Costco are going to emerge from this enormously stronger. Have you read those stories, Mike Allen?
I've written those stories. The big get bigger, Hugh. We're seeing it in media. We're seeing it in consumer buying. And we had a story at the top of Axios AM yesterday from my colleague Erica Pandy just about how Amazon is soaring. And we had the clever GIF, the little arrow, the smile that you get on your package. It looked like one of those like neon signs that was blinking up because Amazon didn't just talk about hiring 100,000 people. They've hired at least 80,000. You know what goes into hiring one person for your operation. It's an astounding accomplishment. Walmart CEO Doug McMillon was out on the Today Show on Friday reminding us that I think every couple of days Walmart sells enough toilet paper for every person in America to have one roll. So these stores, which have been lifelines for their communities, like the volume, the scale is astonishing.
It is. It's going to be the longest lasting economic imprint of this because I do believe in the V. Mike Allen, I want to close with a little personal question for you. I have a routine now. After the show, even though it's raining, I am out for at least an hour. I get outside and I walk on a deserted road and I go my own way and I wear my mask, et cetera, just to keep the blood pumping. Then I have reading, then I have work to do. So I'll write a Washington Post column every other day, and then I will watch a movie and then identify the movie via the music I play on the bump for the next day. What is Mike Allen doing?
So something that we're telling our colleagues at Axios is close your laptop.
Yep.
Turn off your phone. When you're walking, now when I walk, I often call people, relatives. I called through the whole Allen family yesterday for Easter when I was walking. And that can be good use of the time, but also have some time when your phone is off because work is running into life even more than it did before. And like we constantly remind our 190 colleagues at Axios that this is a marathon. This could be months. And especially people who have kids in the household, like they need quiet times. You need a zone. So you need time you can close your door and work, and you need a time that you can step away, close your laptop, engage with your family, and you need some time for yourself. Take a walk, exercise, do it without your phone. You will never, ever, 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 ever say, wow, I wish I'd spent more time on a screen device today.
Well, you know, I do have one iteration of that, which is I believe in audiobooks, and I believe in Eric Larson's new book, The Splendid and the Vile. I just listened to Stephen Ambrose, Citizen Soldiers. There's a lot of terrific books out there that will eat up the time as you walk and exercise. Things that you would never have time in your life for, you've got time for right now if you make use of it. Are you an Audible book guy, Mike Allen?
Absolutely. And, of course, I start every day with Dan Primack's Axios Pro Rata podcast, Smart Brevity, just 10 minutes, a great podcast to catch you up on the day, and then plunge into books. And we love interviews with business figures because, Hugh, here's a little secret for your listeners. People are much more candid on podcasts than they are in press interviews, and so you can get a lot of intel about what people are actually up to. They will say things, I don't know why, they'll say things on podcasts that they would never say for a print or TV interview.
That's the radio effect, too. If they're not looking at you, they just unload.
Yes.
And I will have Josh Hawley on in the third hour because he's the most interesting proposal thus far, the 80% proposal which I'll be exploring with him. Mike Allen, good that you're healthy.
And he
I
was
hope
early with it, too. Happy
Oh,
Easter
yes.
to you and your family. Yeah.
Yeah, and to you, happy Easter to you, Mike. Time for me to tell you about one thing you can do that a lot of you have not yet done, which is to watch No Safe Spaces. Dennis Prager and Adam Carolla's great movie, NoSafeSpaces.com. If you go to NoSafeSpaces.com and you use sale 25, you'll get 25% off. NoSafeSpaces.com. It's got 99% audience approval rating at Rotten Tomatoes because Adam is funny and Dennis is wise. Dennis is not funny. No, actually, Dennis is pretty funny. It's a great film, No Safe Spaces. Also, if you're a small business owner, you've got to join JobCreatorsNetwork.com because, as I'll be discussing with Senator Hawley a little bit later in the program today, there will be large legislative endeavors undertaken in the next 10 weeks, enormous ones. You need a voice for your small business, even if it is shuttered right now. If you intend to come back into business, you can't really count on the Chamber of Commerce. They're America's big business. They deserve to be at the table. You can't count on your trade associations. Some are good, some are bad, some are terrific, some are non-existent. You got to count on someone who understands what it's like to have 100 employees or less. JobCreatorsNetwork.com, JobCreatorsNetwork.com. I told you that I had written a column in the Washington Post, and I hope you go to WashingtonPost.com, read it, scroll down, it's on the landing page, send it to people. It's about Eric Larson's new book about Churchill, and it concludes this way. What Trump might learn from Larson is that Churchill's instincts to break up old systems were crucial to Britain's survival, especially when it came to a top-to-bottom shakeup of the English approach to the production of fighter aircraft. For this task, Churchill tapped, of all people, a press baron, Lord Beaverbrook, who was widely reviled by elites. Beaverbrook did indeed leave a wake of anger and resentment, but also a necessary armada of fighters that saved the Britain from the Luftwaffe. One current analogy, the overdue and urgent transformation of the Food and Drug Administration's approval process. Mostly, though, Churchill displayed unlimited energy and bravado. His personality had driven his legions of haters mad when they rallied to Neville Chamberlain through the 1930s. Their collective contempt seethed as Churchill took up his new duties. Eventually, he won the admiration of the generation that nevertheless topped him from office at first opportunity. We have no idea how this country will respond to this enemy over a long term. I am celebrating the daily access of our free press to the nation's leader and his advisors and contrasting that access with the censored tyranny that kept the menace hidden far too long. Applaud Team Trump when you can, encourage the scientists and public officials where possible, and grieve with those who grieve. History's remit on these months will be remorseless. Try at least not to be a parrot of the propaganda of the one-party state that let the virus loose upon an unsuspecting world, no matter how deep your hatred for Trump or his lieutenants might be. ReliefFactor.com, time for my daily dose, because I go out after the show, unless it's like lightning, I'll be out there. 12 miles on Saturday. I'm very proud of myself. I haven't done that since I ruptured my disc in 2006. And right now, I carry in curcumin, resveratrol, and omega every day, whether I want to or not. And I always want to because I know it works for me. You need to try it. $19.95 is the starter pack. ReliefFactor.com. Get out there, get walking like Mike Allen just said. ReliefFactor.com. Stay tuned. Salena Zito is next. Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt, joined now by Salena Zito. Good morning, Salena. How are you?
Good morning, you. I'm doing swell. How are you today?
Good. Happy day after Easter. I loved your Easter column. I want you to cover that. I also want to cover the vaccine that's emerging out of Pittsburgh. So you've got the floor. First of all, it was an odd Easter, wasn't it?
It was incredibly odd Easter. I spent it alone, which was something I've never done before.
Yep.
And so my parents, though, they are 82 years old, and they drove around to their different great-grandchildren's houses and to just wave to them. And then they took pity on me and did a drive-by viewing to wave at me as well.
I got a nice drive-by viewing we did from a nice young family in our neighborhood, nameless, except Esther and Holda were here, and they were very happy, so it was good to see them, a little Easter parade from the car. Tell me something about, and people can go read your Washington Examiner column, but I want to talk about your Wall Street Journal column from Friday. 2 Pitt scientists have come up with a possible inoculation that you'd apply like a Band-Aid. Now, there are 70 vaccines under development. We pray they all work, but why did this one attract your attention, and what was the response to this Wall Street Journal column?
Well, there was 2 big reasons why this one I was really fascinated by this. First, Pitt has this great history with vaccines, right? This is where Jonas Salk discovered the vaccine for polio, and that people don't think about polio today. That terrified parents. They didn't want to take their kids out. They didn't take them to swimming pools. They didn't take them out to playgrounds because that was the thing that crippled children. So it already had a history of medical research. And also this vaccine is that they are developing is something that they had in the works since 2003, because the coronavirus is related to the SARS corona, and they had already developed a SARS one. So for them, it was something that, when this first came out in January, within 7 days, they were already had this tested on mice.
And so I was very encouraged by this report and by the profile of the 2 doctors in the Wall Street Journal. But there are 70 different vaccines underway. Do you have any kind of a probability assessment from the FDA people they're working with? Do they feel that this is the magic bullet?
They felt pretty confident about that, but they really don't want to talk about it. The other thing that's really great about this vaccine is it doesn't need to be refrigerated. That's what's really unique about it. It's like a little Band-Aid. And it has these, you just put it on the skin, and the skin absorbs it.
Well, if they're right, if it works, it's a Nobel laureate sort of moment. It's interesting about the polio epidemic. I remember standing in line at St. Cyril's and Methodius to take the sugar cube with the polio vaccine. Yep. You had to do it twice. And I guess I would be about 4 or 3 when we did that. It's a very vague memory, but everybody had to line up. And my toxicologist consultant tells me the biggest problem with the vaccine will be in this country to get 95 to 99% of the people to take it, because that's what you need to make it effective. Do you think people will line up like they did for the Salk vaccine?
I think, it's hard to even get people to take the flu shot, right? But they've never been quarantined like this for 6 weeks. So I think the memory of this will make people line up to take it.
Now, I got to ask, Salena, I just asked Mike Allen. I went through my daily routine. What is your daily Monday through Friday routine?
Well, I make sure I get up. I take a shower. I have my cup of coffee. I take a shower. I usually either go for a run or ride my bike, and then I go to work. I make sure that I try to be as consistent as possible as what I would do if this were a normal week.
Agree. Consistency in Monday through Friday. Otherwise, you'll go nuts. Now, the unbearable part of this is that we know Domestic abuse and child abuse is not going down, it's going up, but the opportunities to report it are going down. And I don't know what the Pittsburgh law enforcement and domestic abuse and child abuse agencies are doing. Have you done any reporting on this yet, Salena?
They haven't, not numbers haven't really come out yet, but I have seen nationwide that exactly what you said, that the numbers are up, but the reporting is down, and that's sort of what makes it a challenge. Why the numbers? Why is the reporting down? Well, because you're stuck in the house with the person that's abusing you, and a lot of times people don't have anywhere else to go.
And teachers are not there to be first reporters. Emergency room visits are down, so suspicion is down. If you have a friend or a family member who's caught in that web, turn them in. Let them know. Help them. Salena Zito, you help everyone with your column in the Wall Street Journal and the Washington Examiner. Follow her on Twitter at Salena Zito. Follow me to the next hour on this Monday edition of The Hugh Hewitt Show.
Portions of The Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you in part by Birch Gold Group.
Morning glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. Greetings from a very rainy, stormy Beltway. I'm Hugh Hewitt inside the Beltway, where it was 4:30 in the morning when the thunderstorm decided to roll through and start my day early. But that's fine because it gave me more time to study up on what you need to know. Let's begin with the global view, shall we? The global view is not good. 1,857,000 diagnosed cases. We have no idea how many hundreds of thousands, if not millions, are undiagnosed. We don't know the denominator of the disease. And until we know the denominator, we do not know its lethality. It may have, in fact, spread far and wide. Remember this, as you go about your troubles, just give thanks to God that this does not kill kids often, if at all. It is a seniors and a middle-aged. I mean, there are outliers. There are some teenagers who have died, and we grieve them. But it's leaving infants and babies alone and toddlers. Thank God that it would be awful beyond broadcasting ability if it were not. 109,000 people are known to have died from coronavirus worldwide. Meanwhile, we have crossed the 20,000 mark in the United States, and the number will keep growing. But many people think that we've gone over the worst part. Good news, all of the oil-producing nations have allegedly agreed to reduce oil output. And that has led to a rally on the English and German stock markets. I have no idea what the markets will do today. I never, ever attempt to tell you what they're going to do today because I am not a prophet nor a son of a prophet. But they did agree to reduce output by 9.7 million barrels a day. That should lead to light crude continuing to rise. It's at $23 a barrel. I've told you other headlines. Tara Reid has accused Joe Biden of sexual assault in 1993. This kind of an accusation would have sunk Brett Kavanaugh because there are witnesses to her allegations that are contemporaneous in time. There's detail. There's a sort of thing that would have sunk Brett Kavanaugh. We'll see where it goes. Biggest story medically of the day comes from NBC News. Why some doctors are moving away from ventilators for virus patients. Some hospitals have reported unusually high death rates for COVID-19 patients on ventilators. Some doctors worry the machines could be doing harm. It's an AP story. As health officials around the world push to get more ventilators to treat coronavirus patients, some doctors are moving away from using the breathing machines when they can. The reason some hospitals have reported unusually high death rates for coronavirus patients on ventilators, some doctors worry that the machines could be harming certain patients. The evolving treatment highlights the fact that doctors are still learning the best way to manage a virus that emerged only months ago. They are relying on anecdotal real-time data amid a crush of patients and a shortage of basic supplies. Got to keep your eyes open. Boris Johnson did not go on a ventilator. Boris Johnson went home yesterday, delivered a stirring message to the country. The British Telegraph, the newspaper The Telegraph, has a very long story from their science editor, Sarah Napton, this morning, that will the UK coronavirus death toll really be as high as we are told? Predictions Britain may end up with the largest coronavirus death toll branded, quote, absurd by some experts. It begins apocalyptic predictions that Britain's corona death toll will be the largest in Europe have abounded over the past week. The scaremongering, in quotes, began after a report from the Institute for Health Metrics and Evaluation based at the University of Washington, Seattle, suggested that the UK could reach 66,000 deaths by August, peaking at nearly 3,000 a day, accounting for 40% of the total deaths across the continent. The figures were gleefully seized upon by the left-wing press and emblazoned over front pages as evidence that the government strategy had failed. Yet, within hours, British experts had branded the modeling as absurd. And by this weekend, the IHME had revised down its estimate from 66,000 to 37,494, admitted that it could be as low as 26,000, which is not hugely dissimilar to the Imperial College figure of around 20,000. For anyone following the trajectory of deaths, it was clear that something extraordinary would have to happen for our daily death rate to shoot up to 3,000. All other countries have exhibited a smooth upward trend followed by a gradual leveling off. So the UK would have needed to experience a trend-defying upward kick to get anywhere close to the IHME figures. The IHME is not doing well in this. They don't intend to be wrong. It's just that they are wrong, always. Also from the New York Times, Israel's not-so-secret weapon in the coronavirus fight, the spies of Mossad. What they mean is they're using advanced surveillance technology. I got a request from my iPhone yesterday. Would I participate? I said, absolutely, I'll participate. Do I know anyone with the coronavirus? No. Do I know anyone exhibiting symptoms? No. Are you exhibiting symptoms? No. They have now transferred technology to my phone, which some privacy advocates worry about. I say, what are you, nuts? Of course I'm going to let people know. I want contact tracing, and I believe Google and Apple are working together in a contact tracing combination that will be very potent. Fox News poll. Trump job approval hits new high as voters rally during crisis. And I also point again, my number, by the way, is 1-800-520-1234. This hour, I'm going to have Mike Shear on, but I want to ask you, how you doing? 1-800-520-1234. How are you doing? Open-ended question. How are you doing? I have a Washington Post column up. Trump is doing well. Trump is doing a very good job. The networks that are not carrying his briefings are making the biggest mistake in journalism history. It will expose them as non-news organizations. It will expose them as entertainment cabals if they do not carry the presidential briefing end to end. They can criticize it, critique it, condemn it. They can ask tough questions, but remember, every time you see Donald Trump up there, every single time you see him up there, realize that President Xi Jinping of the country that unleashed this on the world by accident, we are told, by accident, never meets a free press because there is no free press in Beijing. We have a free press. They assail the president. Good for them. Good for him when he knocks them aside verbally. I think his best moments are when he praises political adversaries like Gavin Newsom and Andrew Cuomo are doing good jobs. His worst moments are when he criticizes someone for being a dummy, and they're going to be dummies. There's a bell curve of governors, right? There are 50 governors. There's a best governor, and there's a worst governor. I think, the best governors are Doug Ducey and Mike DeWine. And so other people might have favorites, but I know they're doing a great job. I know there are worse governors out there. I'm not going to name them. No upside in that. Churchill's example. Always go with the positive. That's what my Washington Post column is about. Head over to WashingtonPost.com. You don't read the columns. They're full of just crazy people. Just crazy people. Barry in Orlando. How you doing, Barry?
Hey, I'm doing great, Hugh. How are you?
I'm great. I'm good. I mean, it's raining like heck, and I'm not going to be able to go outside today, which drives me crazy unless it levels off later in the day. But other than that, I'm fine.
Well, we're all fine here. I don't know of anyone that's ill. I did know of someone late last year that, looking back, exhibited the symptoms, but he got over it, and he's doing well. So we're good down here as far as I know.
There's a modest amount of speculation on the West Coast that the virus arrived there in December. I have no opinion on that. I'm waiting to see. They will eventually, via pathology and dead people, find out when and where it arrived, and they'll be able to tell by what route it came. By the way, there's a new talking point on the left that most of the cases in New York came from Europe. Sure, but they started in China. Would everyone please remember, every variant of this virus that is killing people started in Wuhan. It mutates in various places, but if it hadn't been for the Chinese Communist Party, it would not be anywhere in the world today. That's what people need to remember. Maggie in Pittsburgh. Good morning, Maggie. You're on the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Hey, Hugh. Honored to speak to you. We're doing okay here. I think our numbers are excellent. I think we're doing an excellent job. I do worry about Governor Tom Wolf and the things that he has done. I think they're more politically motivated. He shut down real estate, new construction. First thing he shut down was the coal miners. And I hope President Trump sees what's going on here. I know Virginia has real estate and a lot of other things, Ohio, West Virginia. He's not listening to us. So very, very concerned about what's going on in Pennsylvania. And I think Pennsylvania is going to be the state that determines this election.
I think it's definitely a three-state election. Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. Definitely. Maggie, thank you. Randy in Detroit, Michigan. Speaking of Michigan, how are you, Randy? Detroit, one of the hot spots the president talks about all the time.
Yes, it is. It's still pretty scary here. I wear masks and gloves when I go out. but there's been a report on the news that nurses are quitting at one hospital because of too many patients per person and running out of body bags, and that sounds pretty scary. It became very real for me. I lost my oldest brother earlier this week.
Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that. How long was he
And that was
hospitalized for?
I think about 5 days, I think.
How old was he?
They were only communicating through one of his children.
How old was he, Randy?
He was 76 with underlying conditions.
That's still very sad. Our hearts break for you. Sorry, my friend, and to your family. That's happening 20,500 times around the United States minimum, America. Imagine the number of people grieving. Grieve with those who grieve. And stay tuned to the Hugh Hewitt Show. Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt. My game with you every morning is to play the soundtrack of the movie I watched the day before during the quarantine. Fetching Mrs. Hewitt is attracted to Foyle's War. I watch movies. And this is from the soundtrack of, well, I won't tell you. You have to guess. I want to let you know that Susan Page is out with a new story at USA Today this morning. Exclusive. In 4 devastating weeks, America's fears of the coronavirus have exploded. A new poll, USA Today, Ipsos found huge rise in fear. Huge rise. The number of people who say the virus posed a threat to them personally in the USA doubled in a week. Doubled in a week. Statistically significant, definitely. You've got to realize a lot of that is because of unemployment. You've got to realize you've got to join Job Creators Network if you're a small business. They're going to come back. They're going to work on a package. They've got to. Democrats left town without voting additional relief for small businesses. It's incredible they blocked it, but they did. I'll talk with Josh Hawley about it next hour. You should join JobCreatorsNetwork.com right now. Go tell them your stories. Go get involved. Also, if you're going to watch something on TV, don't forget No Safe Spaces. NoSafeSpaces.com. Adam Carolla, Dennis Prager, great thing to watch. But what do you think? What's going on in your life? Mary Lou in Winter Park, Florida. Hi, Mary Lou. How are you?
I'm fine. Good morning.
Good morning.
I have got a brain twister for you that only you with your historical mind could answer for me. And that is, of all the world leaders, past and present, who do you think could handle this virus better than President Trump?
Well, Churchill. But that's why I have this new Washington Post column out on why the president ought to be studying Churchill. There are traits which he ought to copy, of which he'd begin to embrace some, which is relentless optimism, resolve, bravado, impatience, a great deal of demanding of his team and staff. Go over to WashingtonPost.com, Mary Lou, read my column, and you'll see why I would say Churchill. Thank you, my friend Patrick in Illinois. Good morning, Patrick. How go you?
Good morning, sir. How are you doing today?
Great. Which part of Illinois you in?
Southern Illinois. If you're not from Chicago, you're from the South. So.
All right. Welcome.
Well, my wife and I feel very blessed because we're both considered essential workers, so we've been able to maintain our jobs during this whole epidemic. I was wondering, though, she told me something about a Heroes Fund, and I was wondering if that's something they're actually considering doing, or I didn't know if you could give some more insight on that.
I haven't heard anything about it. If I find anything out about it, I will let you know. I know nothing about it. Patrick, keep working. Thank you for all your efforts during a time of peril. Randy in New York. Hello, Randy. Which part of New York are you in?
Good. Yeah, good morning, Hugh. How are you today? You sound pretty good.
Good, but where are you in New York?
Upstate New York. I'm about 100 miles north of Syracuse.
Oh, okay, welcome. What's on your mind? You got to be quick.
Not doing great. I'm in one of the other essentials. I work for the post office. I transport mail, around the area, and my wife's got stage 4 cancer, so obviously I got to be real careful.
Oh, dear.
So, we got some cases up here, but we're all doing really good, doing our thing.
How's your wife doing? Can she get her treatments? Can your wife get her treatments?
Yeah, it's real stickly how they do it, but she's getting taken care of the way she should be.
Excellent.
There's just a lot of big precautions,
I had to go in myself last week, and I'm fine. I don't talk much about myself, but I had to go in, and boy, were they ever careful, right? They're just very, very careful, and that's good. And how the people on the post route, are they greeting you? The president's got to decide whether or not to send money to the post office. I hope he does.
Yeah, so do I, because these post offices, they're doing everything they can just to do what they have to do, and the money's not there for their protection.
Yeah, I think of the Pony Express. You folks are doing great work. Thank you, my friend. Let me get Dick in from Dayton. Dick, you've got 20 seconds. Go.
Morning, Hugh. Hey, everything's pretty good. I work at Lowe's. We've been setting kind of records there, and I just wanted to tell you about I got a birthday the same day as Pete Rose. Go Indians.
Go Indians, go Tribe. I hope they'll move all the teams to California, just play it all in California. I'll tell you more about that after the break with Mike Shear of the New York Times next.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you in part by Job Creators Network.
Welcome back, America. Hugh Hewitt, joined now by Michael Sear of the New York Times. Michael, I play a game with my audience every morning. I watch a movie a day during this quarantine thing, and then I play the soundtrack and see if people can guess what the movie is. So I'm going to go back and play for you the first cut. Adam, can you play the first cut for Michael Sear? I think Michael might be able to guess this movie. That's the first cut. All right, then the second cut. Here's the second one. And here's the third one. All right, so what do you think, Michael? Do you know which movie I watched yesterday?
I should know, but I'm drawing a blank.
Oh, it's Back to the Future from 1985.
Back to the Future, yes, of course.
Have you seen that in 25 years or so? Have you watched it?
I have not, but my daughter is a movie fan and wants to make movies as when she grows up, and she's seen it a million times. So.
Oh, it's just a terrific. I hadn't seen it. It came out in 1985, so I hadn't seen it in 30 years, and it held up pretty well. All right, Michael, I hate to put you on the spot for your newspaper, but I'm going to.
Okay.
The story on Joe Biden and his accuser led to a tweet that was then deleted in part. What do you make of all this?
Well, look, I mean, I think, the question of these kinds of allegations against politicians is always going to be there. I think it's, the responsibility of a paper, of any news organization, is to examine those allegations, to give them the credence they're due, and to sort of try to get to the bottom of it. And that's, I think, what the paper tried to do.
But then they altered the tweet. That's what I'm really getting to. Tara Reid's allegations will be scrutinized by everyone. She'll get a lot of press. I'm not worried about that. If it was Brett Kavanaugh, we'd see her 24/7, but it's not. We're in the era of a virus, and that crowds out other news, even allegations of sexual impropriety. But the Times altered its story. That's what bothers me.
Yeah, look, I don't know what to say. I frankly have been spending so much time over the last 2 weeks kind of buried in the reporting that we did on the COVID-19 that I haven't paid all that much.
All right, let's go to that. In the New York Times Magazine this weekend, I turned this with great interest. They have a story that says, "Restarting America means people will die, so when do we do it?" And they went to talk to people who have moral value judgments. And they interviewed, for the panelists were the Reverend Dr. William Barber, president of Repairs of the Breach, Ann Case, who's a professor of economics at Princeton, Zeke Emanuel, who most people know, Vanita Gupta, who's head of the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights, Peter Singer of Princeton, who most people know, and Emily Bazelon, a staff writer for the New York Times Magazine. Those are the 6 people they asked on the moral question of when to reopen and death. What do you think I think is a problem with that?
What do I think you think is a problem? I
Yeah.
suspect that you think it doesn't. It's tilted in an ideological direction. No,
it is representative of the 5 to 1% of the far left of America's moral thinkers. There is not one member of the center-right clergy or ethical community. There's nobody that is even mildly representative of my worldview. Michael, what is wrong with people? I understand the left is out there. I read it every day. But what is wrong with the left that they don't understand that the right exists?
Boy, putting me on the spot to defend an entire, part of the political spectrum. I think without knowing or having any insight into how that particular panel of people was picked, I share your view that if you're going to, if we're going to assess and evaluate what we should do or what people think we should do in terms of reopening, I think, the best thing to do is to try to find a broad spectrum of views, and that shouldn't be limited by any sort of ideology. It should be, one should expect and look for a bunch of views across the ideological spectrum.
I'm reminded of the New Yorker's film critic who remarked she doesn't know how Nixon won. She doesn't know anyone who voted for him. Reflecting the Manhattan left-winging bias. And I understood in the old days when the New York Times was was very left-leaning because it reflected the island. But the fact of the matter is it's now read nationally. I don't understand. And that brings me to the hardest question of all, about which the Times has no stake in this. This is about cable news. Some people are not carrying the president's briefings. Some are carrying only part of it. Some of them are jumping in and out. I have a column at the Washington Post today that argues this is the low point of modern journalism. In the middle of a crisis, not to carry the entire White House briefing. What do you think about that, Mike Shear?
So I've thought about this a little bit. As a journalist, I think we should be covering. I don't think there's any argument to not cover the President of the United States in the middle of what may be one of the biggest crises in recent memory, at the very least, right? So I agree with that, and I agree with you that that deserves coverage. We should cover it, and there's no argument that I can think of to say, oh, this isn't important to cover. The only caveat I would add to that is, and I've watched virtually every single one of these briefings from beginning to end, and the president has begun starting every briefing with 45 minutes to an hour of repetition, of essentially repeating the same thing that he said the day before. I mean, and it's smart political tactics, right? To sort of keep, it's the repetition of all of the things that you've done and the numbers of of masks that you've provided and the like. And I could see, I'm not a broadcaster, but I could see an argument for waiting until you get to the point where there's the Q&A period where you're really getting new information, or if there's new announcements being made, and the repetition can get a bit much. That said, I think, this is the biggest crisis we've faced in a long time, and I think you have to cover it.
Now, Michael, the response to that is that you and I have both watched every minute of every briefing, and you and I are not the norm. A lot of Americans tune in and out, and the reason repetition works is the Frank Luntz rule. Unless you say something 7 times, a bunch of people don't hear it. And I have been listening to Eric Larson's new book, The Splendid and the Vile. Churchill once gave the finest speech, Britain's finest hour speech. He gave it twice, once in the House of Lords, and then he gave it over the BBC that night with a cigar in his mouth, and it didn't sound very good. And I am struck by the fact that throughout the early crisis of the war, Dunkirk, the bombing, the Blitz, the threat of invasion, Churchill insisted that everyone be upbeat, that they put away their gloom, even though he himself was gloomy and waspish and snappish. It's a great book. I would recommend it highly. But I think that the hatred of Trump is so deep in some sectors of the media that they cannot get the lens off. They can't take off their anti-Trump glasses, even though, as you point out correctly, we ain't seen nothing like this in my lifetime, and you're younger than I am. And I've seen a lot more, and I haven't seen anything like this.
Yeah, look, I think that, and I've heard the criticism from the left during the coverage of the campaign rallies before COVID-19 was around. There's been a lot of criticism on the left that the cable news networks have given Trump too much airtime, and I think you can have that debate, and that's a conversation that one can have in the context of a political campaign. I do think this is different. I think that when you're in the middle of a crisis like this, which is a life and death situation, and people are looking to the federal government for information and for guidance, I don't see as a journalist how you don't cover that story to the fullest. If you look at our newspaper, almost our entire front page, much of the paper is devoted to this crisis right now because it's so important to cover and cover fully. And so, again, I'm not a broadcaster. I don't know anything about TV and cable news and how that works. But my gut tells me that you cover the most important story and you do it fully.
Yeah, and I've got to say, I like Jeff Zucker a lot. He is the head of CNN. I wanted to go back to work for CNN. I never worked for him. I actually never worked for him. I worked with them for Salem. I worked for NBC, and I called up Jeff. I said, "Do you want me back?" And he didn't. That's fine. Mm-hmm. And so I admire his work. I think, though, personal animosity is entering into coverage here. And I just think that is such a disaster for the country, because I know exactly what you're talking about. It is actually maddening for journalists like you and me to listen to the president say the same thing every day. And then I remind myself President Xi Jinping never comes out, never speaks, doesn't get challenged by Jim Acosta or Yamiche Alcindor. And I'd rather hear the same thing every day and then have the new question set in the verbal combat than be living in a totalitarian regime that never has anything.
Oh, look, I couldn't agree more, and I think that what's interesting is that for 2.5 or 2 years, whatever it's been, I think it's journalists like us who have been bemoaning the loss of the daily briefing, obviously before COVID came around, because we understand how important that interaction is, and so it is nice to see the interaction finally happening. I mean, terrible that it took a crisis like this and so much suffering to do it. But it is nice as a journalist to see for long periods of time the leaders of our government submitting to questions from a free and open press, which is something that as a journalist I value.
Now, there is a news story that broke at 6 a.m. from Susan Page, very good journalist over at USA Today. They've done a poll. The number of Americans who feel personally threatened has gone up 100%. Okay, so it doubled in 1 month.
Mm-hmm.
I believe that people have really begun to pay attention now. What will that fear do, Michael Sear, do you think, to the way that people react?
Well, look, I was thinking about this yesterday, actually, that I do wonder, once we actually get out of the immediate threat and the immediate crisis and we are back to work and we're back to school and we are interacting with other people, I do wonder whether there will be a lingering fear of each other. There will be a lingering, will we be touching and hugging each other less? Will we be, kind of moving to the side and, not trying to walk past people with more distance? Maybe that's a good thing because we'll all be able to keep each other safe, but it's also feels like there might be something of a loss there in society as we all sort of give in to the fear that you're talking about.
The long tail of the pandemic will be exactly manifested as you just described. The great news, the thing for which I'm grateful, it does not appear to take children, and therefore children will not stop being children. And that's great.
Yeah. No, let's hope so, because that's a part of childhood that that is the one of the very best parts, is that lack of fear and the ability to just sort of be carefree with each other, and hopefully that will continue.
Innocence. Michael Sear, great to talk to. Shear M, Shearm on Twitter, one of the great journalists of our time. Always good to talk to Michael. Time to tell you, my friends, about this, ReliefFactor.com. As was just noted by Larder on Twitter, I won't be using this today. I took it, but I won't be using it because I use it when I walk or run, and it's just pouring in the Beltway. It's going to be one of those days where I'm not going to dance among the lightning bolts and try and socially distance. So no long walks today, day off from that. But that's okay. I take it every day because you got to maintain the levels in your body of Icarian, curcumin, resveratrol, and omega. Go and get your starter pack now, $19.95. The only 4 supplements I take. I've been taking them for years. It works. Don't forget honorboundcoffee.com as well. When you drink your lukewarm coffee, as I do every day, it should be honorboundcoffee.com. Every dollar of every profit that is made by Honorbound Coffee goes to support military families. Honorboundcoffee.com. Stay tuned, America. It's the Hugh Hewitt Show. Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Josh Hawley, senator from Missouri, joins me at the top of next hour. Do not miss that. He has some innovative ideas, which I think may be a key to restarting the ignition on the American economy. Senator Hawley is up next. I have a new Post column, WashingtonPost.com. Scroll down, send it to everyone. It reads as follows. It begins, President Trump is doing a good job of leading the country through this pandemic. All right, that triggered a lot of people, and the comments reflect that. Skip the comments. Crazy people. President Trump is doing a good job of leading the country through this pandemic. It is possible to play a parlor game of what might have been. It might be President Mitt Romney's last year in office and Vice President Paul Ryan leading the task force, but for Hurricane Sandy or Candy Crowley's infamous intervention in the 2012 debate. Or President Hillary Clinton might be at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue had cable news not so lavishly devoted time to Trump, certain of his inability to win in 2016. But to borrow from Don Rumsfeld, you go to battle a pandemic with the president you have, and we have a good one for this moment. This observation jars his critics and outrage those who feel hate for him. But at least half the country agrees. This is a challenge unique in U.S. history. And there has arrived at precisely the right moment a new book designed to drive home how right it is that Trump stick to his daily briefings and that he continue to emphasize the prospects of victory over what he calls the invisible enemy. Rarely, rarely has a book met a time so fortuitously as Eric Larson's new The Splendid and the Vile, a saga of Churchill family and defiance during the Blitz. No, Trump is not taking on Churchillian qualities. Winston Churchill was unique. But the dizzying pace at which Britain found itself engulfed by war and then thrown back first in France and then in the Blitz is a dramatic reminder of dire challenges past that were overcome. Throughout the early months of disaster, defeat, and retreat, Churchill insisted that everyone in his cabinet, in the country really, choose to put on confidence and resolve like an overcoat. Even when gloomy, and Churchill often was, or waspish, snappish, and impossible to please, and it seems like a daily occurrence in Larson's account, Churchill knew his audiences were many. In Britain, across its empire, in America's ambivalent White House and Congress, and of course, in Berlin. Whenever Trump embarks on his briefings, remind yourself of his many audiences, and that President Xi Jinping engages in no such back and forth, and as General Secretary of the Chinese Communist Party is very much opposed to the idea of a free press, much less to the idea of dueling with the Jim Acostas and Yamiche Cinders of Beijing. There are none. Bravo to the journalists who assail Trump, and bravo to the president who brushes them aside when he feels their questions are unnecessarily laden with fear or gloom. The president's best moments are when he praises political foes, such as Governors Andrew Cuomo of New York or Gavin Newsom of California, who have proved adept allies in an extraordinary war with the virus. His worst moments are when he attacks any American. The cable networks that are not carrying every minute of every briefing are committing a horrific error by censoring news much of the American people want, if only so that they can storm at it. The decision not to carry briefings is so astonishing that it will in time be recognized as a low point in the history of, quote, journalism as a craft, or at a minimum, a marker of the craft's evolution from the news business into a ratings-driven entertainment cabal. What Trump might learn from Larson, though I suspect Larson thinks Trump's personal idiosyncrasies as distasteful as some he scorches in his book, is that Churchill's instincts to break up the old system was crucial to Britain's survival, especially when it came to a top-to-bottom shakeup of the English approach to the production of fighter aircraft. For this task, Churchill tapped, of all people, a press baron, Lord Beaverbrook, who was widely reviled by elites, and I should add, knew nothing about aircraft production. Beaverbrook did indeed leave a wake of anger and resentment, but also a necessary armada of fighters that saved Britain from the Luftwaffe. One current analogy, the overdue and urgent transformation of the Food and Drug Administration's approval process. Mostly, though, Churchill displayed unlimited energy and bravado. His personality had driven his legions of haters mad when they rallied to Neville Chamberlain through the 30s. Their collective contempt seethed as Churchill took up his new duties. Eventually, Churchill won the admiration of a generation that nevertheless tossed him from office at first opportunity. We have no idea how this country will respond to this enemy, the virus, over the long term. I am today celebrating the daily access of our free press to the nation's leader and his advisors, and contrasting that access with the censored tyranny that kept the virus menace hidden far too long. Applaud Team Trump when you can, encourage the scientists and public health officials where possible, and grieve with those who grieve. History's remit on these months will be remorseless. Try at least not to parrot the propaganda of the one-party state that let the virus loose upon an unsuspecting world, no matter how deep your hatred for Trump or his lieutenants might be. That's my column at the Washington Post. I urge you to go over to WashingtonPost.com and send it everywhere. People have got to get on the same team. We are all in this together, and I will be right back with Senator Josh Hawley after the break at the top of the hour. Stay tuned. This is the Monday edition of the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show brought to you by Sierra Pacific Mortgage. For more info, call 888-888-1172.
Morning glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. Greetings to my 400 affiliates. It's Hugh Hewitt on the Monday after Easter in the era of the pandemic. Welcome. I am joined by Senator Josh Hawley of Missouri, one of the big minds in the Senate, one of the new voices in the Senate, to talk about what the Congress does next. But first, good morning, Senator. Thank you for joining me.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
How is the Hawley family, both immediate and, upper, your parents, your grandparents, and everyone around you?
Thanks for asking. Everybody's doing fine. My kids, my little boys who are 7 and 5, celebrated a very happy Easter. And, they're out of school, of course, along with every other school child in America. And they think it's just wonderful. I'm not sure that Mommy and Daddy think the same. But at any event, we're very blessed, Hugh, to have all the family be healthy and to be able to spend Easter together here at home in Missouri. So we have nothing to complain about.
The great grace of this, Senator, is that this plague is passing over the children. I don't know how we could deal with grief if children in large numbers or any numbers at all were dying.
Yes, that's exactly right. And there's something about it as a parent of young kids. There's just something about it psychologically that in the midst of the trial and the challenge here, and it's very significant. Missouri has thousands of cases, and we've seen a number of hospitalizations. We've lost a number of Missourians, and we're not out of the woods yet. But you're right. I mean, to have our young folks and our little children be spared is a very big deal, and I think it gives us all hope for the future, because we are going to beat this disease, Hugh, as you've talked about, as we've talked about. Like, we're going to break the back of this thing. There is no doubt. There is no question. It's just a matter of time, and what we need to do in the meantime to make sure that people keep their jobs and that we're able to surge out of this together as a nation.
Josh Hawley, I was inspired this weekend by listening to Eric Larson's new book, The Splendid and the Vile. It's about Churchill's leadership in the early months of the war when everything was bad. Dunkirk, the Blitz, everything was a disaster. And I think Donald Trump is doing a fine job. I wrote it up in the Washington Post today. But mostly the example of Churchill is try everything, break the glass, pull the alarm, put Lord Beaverbrook in charge of aircraft production because he doesn't know anything about airplanes, but he's a hell of a leader. And that's why I turned to you. You broke the glass, and you came up with a proposal that first I'd like you to lay out, then I'd like to explore with you. It is not in any way, shape, or form conservative, but I think it is urgently worthy of consideration.
Well, listen, we are in an unprecedented time, and this is a health pandemic like we've never seen in this country. Closest analog is 100 years ago with the 1918 influenza. We've never seen an economic, I hesitate to use the word collapse, because this is being induced. There's nothing wrong with the underlying economy, but the government, we've never had the government take measures like this to fight a health pandemic like this that is shutting down large swaths of our economy. And, we are facing a true crisis, Hugh. And so my view is this, that if the government, in order to fight this pandemic, if the government is going to take these health measures that force people out of work and force them home from jobs, which may well be necessary to beat this thing, that we need to take comparable measures to keep the jobs that people have, to keep their employment, to keep them attached to their ability to earn a wage and support their families through the duration of the crisis. And that's why I have proposed a payroll tax rebate that would allow employers to rehire every person who has been laid off because of the pandemic, and for businesses who are having to shut down, for folks who are having to go without work because of this pandemic, this same program would cover 80% of employers' wages, 80% across the country, for every business that's been affected. That would allow us to maintain employment. It would allow employees to retain their jobs, support their families, and then be in the position to surge strong once the economy reopens.
Now, Senator Hawley, I am familiar with the payroll protection program because the Nixon Foundation, which I also lead, took advantage of it, went in, made our application to our community bank. They gave us our 2 months payroll, or 250% of payroll. I don't have to lay anybody else off. It's wonderful. It worked for a small business. How is your proposal different from the payroll protection plan the extension of which, or the refunding of which, was blocked last week by Democrats in the Senate. I can't believe they did it, but they did it. How does Hawley proposal build on the McConnell proposal?
Yeah, and shamefully blocked. May I just add, Hugh, to your point? I mean, this program has been a desperately needed lifeline, and I have spent most of my time, really, in the last 2 weeks, in terms of serving my constituents, helping small businesses get these loans. I would say what's different about this proposal is that it's bigger, it's bolder, and it's meant to protect every job in America that is threatened, and it's more direct. One of the things we found with the payroll protection plan, which covers, by the way, you can use the payroll protection loans.
Senator, you're moving around. I think your phone is kind of breaking up on us, so you got to stay put. Go ahead.
The payroll protection plan covers a number of things, Hugh, beyond just payroll, which can be a strength for small business. You can use it for rent. You can use it for utilities. You can use it for mortgage. What my plan would do is it's bigger, it's bolder, and it's more direct. And in terms of, it says it will cover every employee in America. We want to make sure that every person who is affected, no matter who they work for, where they work, is able to get their wage, is able to keep their job. And so, number one, my plan would try to rehire every person who has been laid off because of COVID-19. It would give business incentive. It would give them a bonus, as it were, to rehire every single person, number one. Number two, it would cover every wage up to the median at 80%. For any business that has been affected, no matter where the business is, no matter the size, again, to try to preserve the job. This is a worker-focused plan. And then for the existing small business grant, oh, by the way, Hugh, let me just also say, it's a direct payment to the employer. So it flows through the employer to the employee. You don't have to apply for grants or loans. It's direct. The government advances those payments directly. So it's faster, hopefully, and it can last for the duration of the crisis, which we hope won't be long, but as long as is necessary. The other thing I would say, Hugh, is that as it relates to the small business loans, those can be used then for small businesses to pay their rent, to pay their mortgages, to pay their utilities, to help replace lost revenue. My plan is designed to focus on wages, supporting employees, getting people their jobs back, and getting them ready to surge when this economy reopens.
This is, in essence, what I've been calling business interruption insurance, with the federal government as the insurer. And people are familiar with that. If you get hit with a tornado and your business is lost, your dry cleaner, your pizza shop, your church, by the way, your preschool, you have business interruption insurance. The insurer strokes you a check. I don't know whether it's 80% of your revenue or 100%, but you've been paying premiums on that. Is that, in essence, what you're saying the federal government should do, is step up to everyone who has had a payroll or a business and make them whole, or 80% of whole?
Yes, I think that's a very good analogy, Hugh. And I know a number of businesses have, certainly in my state, who have business interruption insurance, have tried to apply for that and get it. What we're finding is the insurers say that, number one, they just don't have the wherewithal to cover these kind of losses. And number two, typically a health pandemic of this sort, where the government is the one that's actually asking businesses to close, workers to go home, a lot of times it's not covered under the terms of the insurance. So, that is what that is, and there's various different insurance policies. But setting all that aside, my view is this: if the government is going to tell workers, you got to stay home for the health of the country, then we've got a role to play here. The government has a role to play to help those workers keep their jobs. And at the bottom line, Hugh, I don't want to see unemployment in this country, which is now already too high. I don't want to see it go to 20%. I don't want to see it go to 30%. Workers shouldn't be forced to bear the burden of this pandemic. They haven't done anything wrong. Businesses haven't done anything wrong. Let's keep them up and running so that we can surge out of this, because we are going to beat this pandemic. The end is in sight. We've got to be ready to get back to work as soon as possible and keep families whole, keep workers whole, keep businesses open and operating, so we can get back to it as soon as possible.
You see, I think this has enormous appeal because it's a sort of freeze-dried economy. We're putting it in the deep freezer. Now we're going to add water, stir, and heat, and it will be up and going. But my question to you is, what does the leader think? Because this doesn't go anywhere unless it gets out of the Republican caucus. Then you've got to go find at least 7 Democrats who agree they don't care what the price tag is, and I don't. It's not going to reach 27% of the GDP, which it was the height of our GDP deficit, I think, in 1943 when we were at war. A, do you have the leader's support? B, do you have the caucus support? C, do you have 7 Democrats who'd go for it?
Well, I think we're working on all those things, and I can't speak for any other senator. I will tell you that I have talked to a number of other senators, and I think right now, Hugh, this is such a fast-moving situation that I think everybody is still trying to wrap their heads around it. I mean, the job loss numbers are beyond anyone's wildest imaginings, and fortunately in the worst way. I mean, who would have predicted 6.6 million unemployment claims again last week? Of course, they revised the number upward from the week before. So these are numbers I certainly didn't anticipate. I don't think anybody anticipated. So I think that right now you can see if you just follow what folks are saying publicly in Congress, Senate, you can see people saying, "Whoa, this is turning out to be a economically a much more challenging and frankly alarming situation than I think anybody had anticipated." And I think there's a growing realization that Congress needs to act to do something further. And here's my bottom line: why wouldn't we work now to keep people's jobs, to get Americans rehired, to get ready to work? Why would we do that now on the front end, as opposed to watching all these businesses small and medium-sized businesses have to lay off workers? The huge businesses, in some instances, I think probably a little too gladly lay off workers, but then come to Congress and say, we want a bailout for XYZ. I don't want to give huge corporate bailouts to companies that have laid off bunches of workers on the back end. Let's save the jobs on the front end. I think there'll be bipartisan support for that. But let's see. We've got to work to build it, and we're in the process of doing that.
It is an economic tsunami, and people don't realize the nature of the devastation, although the claims are the first indicator of how vast it is. My question to you is, do you have a price tag estimated yet for what this would cost?
Well, we know what some of the estimates for the unemployment piece, Hugh, that was in this last act, Phase 3, the CARES Act, which contains significant boost in unemployment benefits to try and replace lost wages. And some economists have estimated that will cost upwards of $260 billion. So here's my basic point, is that we can certainly make people whole through unemployment benefits again on the back end. Wouldn't it be better, though, to keep them their jobs in the first instance? So, I think if you take that as a rough estimate, what we're paying people not to work, what we're paying them once they've lost their job, I would rather, in this extreme circumstance, in this emergency, I would rather see them keep the job and have us work to support businesses in keeping the jobs and keeping the wages on the front end. So we're certainly talking about something that's in that price range in terms of what has been allotted already for unemployment. But to your point, we're going to spend this money one way or another. I mean, Congress has appropriated already $2 trillion. A large portion of that is for unemployment. Let's get the jobs back. Let's get people back ready to work. Let's give families that peace of mind. Let's give businesses the ability to actually open up when the economy gets the green light. I'd rather take those steps and spend the money that way.
You persuaded me. I think it's business interruption insurance. There are a couple other things I'd like to see a bond program like Victory Bonds, like Liberty Bonds, pandemic bonds. I think the president is considering it. I'd like to see a bunch of other things, but I do worry that any legislation will attach barnacles. That barnacles will attach to any legislation as it moves through special interest hell. Is there any hope of just getting a clean restart? This is like the car will idle, but we're going to keep gas in the car. It would encourage millions of people. I mean, it would just absolutely remove fear from a lot of people's lives, which is less related to the virus and more related to what's going to happen to their jobs.
Yeah, exactly right. As I've talked to you with economists and thinking through this plan and designing it, what I've heard over and over is people say, listen, if you have millions and millions of folks who lose their jobs and then we get the green light to really get back to work, there's a lot of lost time there, of course, for the worker, number one, who has to go out and try to reapply, or if they've been furloughed, figured out when do I get to come back. Of course, some workers are losing their health care, they're losing their jobs. That's a huge issue, I could say, as a parent. And then businesses, if they have had to lay off workers, they've got to hire. So why do all of that? Let's skip all of that. Let's keep people on payroll. Let's get them ready to work. To your point about special interest hell, I'm with you. I mean, it's just even what we saw in Phase 3 with the Democrats and probably some others attempting to attach all kinds of special interest provisions. We don't need any of that junk. Again, I would just appeal to my colleagues on this, that this is a national emergency. This is not the opportunity for you to enact or stick into the bill your favorite little pet projects that you've wanted to pass. for a decade. This is a time to focus on the good of the country. You could try to pass stuff later.
The Hawley approach would also have the incredible benefit of allowing people to make their mortgage payments, allowing people to make their rent payments, allowing people to make their insurance payments, their car insurance payments. All of that would be covered. Maybe not at 80%, maybe at 85 or 90%. People can always cut 10% out of their expenses somehow. But Josh Hawley, talk to me a little bit about, I want assurance, you believe it would be appropriate to cover churches, not-for-profits, and any 501c3 that the ACLU would claim would be Establishment Clause violation. I think it's a bad idea. I think it would be a bad argument, but they will make that claim. In your view, is mutual aid delivered on the same ground to everyone constitutional?
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, it's not only constitutional. I think it's probably required by the Constitution, Hugh, and that, the Supreme Court has been pretty clear in recent years that if you offer a program to nonprofits, and this one certainly would be. I mean, we want to save nonprofit jobs as well here. That you can't exclude religious nonprofits simply on the basis of their religious mission. So just as the Paycheck Protection Program is flowing to churches, and I have helped a number of churches in my state apply and get those small business loans, so too we need to save the jobs. We're talking about saving jobs here. So the jobs of churches, the jobs of other religious nonprofits, their employees, they ought to be saved too. Folks ought to be able to get those wages. Again, this is an emergency. This is an unprecedented situation. We're not talking about a new program that lasts forever, by the way, Hugh. I mean, that's the beauty of this is clean in the sense that the payment goes direct to the business for the worker, and it ends when the emergency ends. We don't set up a new bureaucracy. We don't create new agencies. We don't do any of that stuff. This is an emergency. Let's save the jobs. Let's get back to work. And then when we're back to work, it's over. The mission will be concluded, and then we can all go on and surge out of this thing strong.
A last question, Senator Hawley. The gig economy, whether it is a performance artist in New York, whether it is a cooking school that operates in people's kitchens, whether it's a writer who does freelance, they have year-over-year earnings. They can prove up what they made last April and May and June. Would your approach cover the gig economy?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And I think, again, folks who are sole proprietors, I mean, who have their own thing, they work as maybe as independent contractors in some sense, the various ways that the gig economy is structured for the worker. But the goal here is to help workers and is to save jobs. And to your point of a second ago, Hugh, just thinking about the effects of this on people's psychology and the encouraging strength that this would have, I think to go out and to say that we're going to try to save every job in this country, we're going to get this unemployment rate down, we're going to get people ready to work again, that's something we can do now. It's a great national undertaking. It's one that we can accomplish. It's something that we can do. It's a task that we can win. It's a victory we can win right now. I think doing that together will provide such encouragement to folks that then when we get the green light to open back up, we'll be able to surge strong out of this, and it will really give people hope.
Okay, I lied. One last question. Have you called President Trump and discussed it with him yet?
Well, I never comment on my conversations with the president, Hugh, but I think it is safe to say that I have been in touch with a number of people in the White House, and I'll let you infer from that what you will. I told the president early on I would never, ever talk about our conversations, but I'll just put it this way. I visit with the president on a regular basis, and we've talked about various aspects of his strong leadership. I think it has been strong, and I think something like this, again, a goal that we can meet that would be fantastic for this country, is something that I think that he would like, and I hope he'll pursue.
I agree with you, and I hope he does, and I hope we hear more about the Hawley plan soon and from Leader McConnell, from the GOP caucus, and that you find 7 Democrats who will put aside partisanship and move forward because it's simple, it's elegant, and it would work. Senator Josh Hawley, thanks for joining me this morning.
Thanks for having me.
Whatever you want, America, you may have missed a little bit of that. I'm going to post the entire conversation over at HughHewitt.com. I'm going to put the transcript up as soon as Generalissimo wakes up. He worked on Good Friday, so he has today off. Honestly, he does get a day off every now and then. I'm going to make sure that everyone gets it. I think this is the ticket. John Lovitz would say, that's it. That's the ticket. I think that's it. It's business interruption insurance, comprehensive, complete, effective, quick, confidence-inspiring. President Trump will like it. Mitch McConnell should like it. The GOP caucus should like it. And Democrats should get the heck out of the way. Let me tell you now about AndrewandTodd.com. Some of you are going to rush out there and refinance your house. That's fine. AndrewandTodd.com are up and running. AndrewandTodd.com are with Sierra Pacific Mortgage. They are lenders. They are not brokers. You can call them, 888-888-1172, and tell them I need to get money out of my house. I need to refinance, or I need to buy a house. I'm going to take advantage of what is a very slow market for sellers and maybe drive down the price a little bit. You can do that. AndrewandTodd.com will get you pre-qualified. But you got to start by going to their website, AndrewandTodd.com, or calling them at 888-888-1172. Overseas, England is up almost 3%. Germany up 2.25% because oil has gone up to $22, almost $23 a barrel. I don't know what today's market will bring, but I am optimistic that they're going to love what they see in the oil markets and across the pond. Stay tuned. It's the Hugh Hewitt Show. Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt. Need a little encouragement, a little inspiration? I've got it for you. Heath Hardage Lee is the author of a terrific book, The League of Wives, the untold story of the women who took on the U.S. government to bring their husbands home. We're going to go back in time 50 years to when hundreds of American prisoners of war languished in North Vietnam, and their wives made them the centerpiece of the campaign to bring them home. Talk about isolation. These were the heroes of America's recent past, and Heath Hardage Lee tells their story in The League of Wives. Good morning, Heath. Welcome to the program.
Good morning. Thanks for having me on.
Tell us a little bit about how you conceived the project. You know, we at the Nixon Library find this to be just a thrilling story where eventually, when we reopen, get to have an exhibition on it. But tell us about the League of Wives, how they functioned, what they did, and how they might inform people's attitudes towards the present crisis.
Sure. They really are great examples in the pandemic of keep calm and carry on. And I found the story in archives originally. I'm a historian and a curator, so I always end up finding stuff in archives. This was starting out in Virginia at the Virginia Museum of History and Culture. I found some wonderful papers from Phyllis Galante, who was a POW activist from Virginia, and then moved on to archives all over the country, D.C., of course, the Nixon Library, the Dole Archive in Lawrence, Kansas, and was able to just uncover this story through the archives and also diaries of the women involved about these courageous POW MIA wives who come together to rescue their husbands from the Hanoi Hilton in North Vietnam.
How many POWs, how many wives, what year did they come together, and how long did they stay together?
Yes, well, eventually this movement started under Sybil Stockdale, who many people will remember. Jim Stockdale, Admiral Jim Stockdale. He's been in the news quite a bit with the Stockdale paradox lately. It's very interesting to see that all over the internet. Very well-known hero from Vietnam. But Sybil was the one that started this movement out of the San Diego area in Coronado. In 1967, she started something called the San Diego League of Wives, and this evolves and spreads all over the country. You have thousands of POW MIA families involved, and it becomes the National League of Families for American Servicemen and Missing in Southeast Asia. In 1970, it's incorporated in D.C., and it becomes a huge lobbying movement to get the guys out and to account for the missing servicemen.
And so when they rallied together, originally they found no one wanted to listen to them. President Johnson was not particularly eager to talk about the POWs, and that's a story for a different time. And President Nixon's response, I'm curious about how the women rallied in the face of the fear that their husbands might not be coming home, and many of them did not come home.
Yes, many did not come home. The MIA problem is still huge, and I believe there are 1,587 still missing from that war. So the way, though, it was interesting between the Johnson and the Nixon administrations. Under the Johnson administration, there was something called the keep quiet policy, and this had been the policy even before Johnson, that you were to say nothing if your husband was shot down to anyone except your immediate family. Of course, this was impossible because this war, unlike some of the other wars we had fought, went on forever. So under President Nixon, the women had already gone public before President Nixon came on board under Sybil Stockdale in the papers about the POW situation and about the torture they were undergoing. But President Nixon and his administration gave them a really strong platform to go public, to really make this an issue, to publicize what was going on, which embarrassed the North Vietnamese into some form of compliance, eventually resulted in the men's release, and would have the best accounting possible for the MIAs would have happened had Saigon not fallen and the communists taken over. So that was, after that happened, that was the end of that for a number of years.
Now, silence is never effective. That's my view about any kind of problem.
Never.
Silence is never effective. The League of Wives is your book. These women did not stay silent, but they also connected with each other. And I'm thinking now of the COVID patient families across the United States, of the online forums for them. I just believe advocacy always is effective. Not angry advocacy, but persistent, informed advocacy. Heath, what do you think?
Oh, completely agree. I mean, these women are role models too for grassroots organizing. They saw a problem. They were told to keep quiet. They were trained as military wives to follow the rules, to follow the protocols. So it took great courage to question their own government and say, this isn't right. We must do something. And they did it in a very, really an elegant, organized, and diplomatic way. But they put the pressure on the government consistently until they got what they should have gotten long before, which was some accountability and some public discussion about the problem. That made all the difference. So I couldn't agree more. And it's so topical today. It applies to so many issues, just like the COVID crisis.
You know, Heath Lee, you just said elegant, organized, diplomatic. That contrasts with, for example, the Twitterverse. It contrasts with a lot of social media. Elegant, organized, diplomatic means persistent, but never lose anyone's ear by screaming at them.
Exactly. That they were so great at that. The diplomacy was what was so key. There wasn't a need to do that, but they were consistent. They put the pressure on, and they never let up. And I agree with you. The Twitterverse is out of control with these, no rules and no manners either. And these ladies were always kept their manners. They had their white gloves on. They took them off when they had to get things done, and they put them back on. So they are personal heroes of mine for all that they did.
How many are still with us?
Oh, many of them. It's interesting. There's sort of two groups: the younger wives in their 20s who followed the lead of the older wives like Sybil Stockdale and Jane Denton, who were senior wives in their 40s. And sadly, Sybil and Jane have passed away, but many of the younger wives are still with us. I've talked to many of them over the Easter holiday, and they're so pleased, I think, to see their story, which was really not acknowledged for so long. I think they're very modest, humble people. They don't want credit, but I was so happy that I could give them that credit and kind of put a spotlight on their achievements, which were tremendous.
Heath Lee, is this going to be a television show or a movie or anything? Because it's a story that needs to be told again and again and again because it does inspire people.
Yes, I agree. And it appeals to, I think, across the political spectrum. There's sort of something in this story for everyone. And yes, I was thrilled to be picked up by Reese Witherspoon and Hello Sunshine, and then Sony 3000, which is a new division of Sony, to have a feature film. We are actually working on the script as we speak. I'm consulting on the film, and I'll be an executive producer on it. So we are hoping as soon as this crisis lifts, we'll keep moving forward. But we are in the midst of the script, and I was so pleased that Reese Witherspoon picked it up. She's been such a strong voice for women's stories. So this is a good one. I think it'll appeal to everyone.
And when did the men learn about their wives, the League of Wives? They're obviously locked up in the Hanoi Hilton. They're not communicating except by virtue of whatever the North Vietnamese tell them, or the propagandists from the United States who went there let their names be erased from our memory. How did they figure out that their wives had gotten it together?
Well, the ones who had been there for so long, of course, did not know this at first. However, there are a couple of ways. Coded secret letters that come through. Sybil Stockdale, Jane Denton, Phyllis Galante, who I mentioned earlier, were all trained by naval intelligence to write secret coded letters to their husbands in prison. And that was the way they communicated and how they found out about the torture going on. Of course, the North Vietnamese communists were lying the whole time, saying, "Oh no, they're teaching English in Hanoi, and we're having tea with them," while they were being severely tortured. So the wives find out. That's one of the ways the communication happens. And, of course, the men get some limited information about the league, then very little. It's really the younger pilots who are shot down later towards the end of the war that are stuck at the Hanoi Hilton towards the end that they bring news about, guys, guess what your wives are doing at home? And that is such a morale booster towards the end of the war. That's when they find out a little bit. And then they don't really fully understand what's been done until they get home. And President Nixon and that administration informs them about what these wives have done, the extent that they've gone to rescue them.
Now, the other thing I love about the League of Wives is it reminds us that communist governments play fast and loose with the truth. They are allergic to it. And in this era of the virus, we ought not to believe anything that a communist government tells us, period.
I would agree with that. I mean, they lied just unbelievably in this war. They had signed, by the way, the Geneva Conventions of War guaranteeing decent prisoner treatment in 1957. And I thought it was very telling. One of the wives told me that her husband, a pilot who was shot down and, by the way, never returned, he had a Geneva Conventions of War card. Everyone did that they carried with them. And he laughed and said, that is not worth the paper it's printed on if I do get captured. And that was very telling. I mean, they knew going in what would happen. There was no regard for those kind of rules at all. So I would agree with you on communist regimes.
The League of Wives, the untold story of the women who took on the U.S. government to bring their husbands home, by Heath Hardage Lee. The League of Wives is at Amazon.com. It will be a feature film soon. And Heath, I look forward to seeing you back when the Nixon Library reopens so we can talk about this in person in front of a live audience. But I appreciate your spending time with me this morning.
Well, thank you so much, Hugh. I appreciate you having me on, and I look forward to meeting you in person as well.
Heath Hardage Lee, the book is League of Wives. Thank you. Time for me to remind you that you can get that book. You can also go to No Safe Spaces. My friend Prager made this funny movie with Adam Carolla. Adam's funny. Dennis is just there. Now, that's not true. Dennis is funny, too. I just like to give Dennis a hard time. No Safe Spaces has a 99% audience rating at RottenTomatoes.com, the highest rated film of last year. People love Dennis. They love Adam. And they'll give you 5% off. SALE25 is the code to use. And don't forget Job Creators Network. If you're a small business and you're reeling under the blows of the deep freeze of the American economy, head over to jobcreatorsnetwork.com. Don't forget andrewandtodd.com. I keep looking at the overseas market and thinking we're going to have a great day today in the United States because England's up 3%. We will see. And finally, relieffactor.com. You might be in a part of the country, unlike the Beltway, where it's dry, where you can go outside and walk around. You might be in a part of the country where it's completely drenched, but you're going to walk anyway because that's who you are. Well, relieffactor.com helps you, especially if you're adapting in the age of the virus to working a different set of muscle groups because you can't use the gym, so you're walking or running or strolling or doing leg thrusts or whatever you do. I see people out in the park doing the doggondest things. Whatever it is, relieffactor.com will help you. I carry curcumin, resveratrol, and omega. Those 4 natural supplements taken together boost your system support for the temporary relief of minor aches and pains. And do not forget Honor Bound Coffee. Seth and Pete Talbot, son and father, together they said we're starting a company to help serve the military families of America. That's honorboundcoffee.com. Every dollar of profits they make from honorboundcoffee.com goes to the military family. So don't drink another cup of coffee except from honorboundcoffee.com. Stay tuned. Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt. My very long interview with Josh Hawley. The audio will be posted at hughhewitt.com. The transcript will be up and over at YouTube. It will be posted as soon as our engines of distribution are done at my channel at YouTube. Listen to it. Josh Hawley's on to something. I'm joined now by Tim Alberta of Politico Magazine. You ought to follow him at Twitter at Tim Alberta. Good morning, Tim. How are you?
Morning, Hugh. How are you, sir?
Good. Everybody in the family good?
Yeah. How about you guys?
Yep, everyone is fine, except I'm looking at the mock draft that Dane Brugler, who is the best mock draft person, put out, and he's got the Browns taking Mekhi Becton of Louisville. I'm not sure about that. He's got the Lions taking, and he's the best draft analyst in my view, Jeff Okudah at number 3. What do you think of that, Tim?
Well, I'm torn because I just don't love the value of a quarterback. I think you can make an argument that a quarterback is the least important defensive position in the modern NFL. But Okudah is such a blue chip prospect that I don't know. I'm torn. I'm not. If I'm honest, I would love to see us draft Tua, but I know that's never going to happen.
Would you trade down?
Ideally, I think you trade down to 6 or 7 and you get Okudah there. But if you stay at 3, I just don't love the value of taking corner at 3. But there isn't an obvious pass rusher there that they're in love with. I think ideally somebody trades up to 2 and they take Tua, and then Chase Young falls into our lap.
You would be so lucky if that were, because that's what they obviously would like to do. Enough football. Let's turn to your most recent piece in Politico Magazine on the governor of Michigan. Tell us what you found, and then tell me why you can't buy garden tools in Michigan.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting, Hugh. I had covered Gretchen Whitmer 15 years ago or so in the State House, and I was very young. She was very young, and I kept very close tabs on her over the years because, and it was funny, a former hotline colleague of mine joked with me the other day and said, I remember you talking about Gretchen Whitmer back in 2009, saying that one day she was going to have sort of national buzz. She was just somebody who, was very clear early on. She was ambitious, she was smart, she was talented, and she has been on a pretty steady upward trajectory. It's interesting. I spent the early part of last week with her and had spent a couple of weeks leading up to that doing all my reporting for this profile. And the profile published Thursday night. Well, the same day was when she announced this expanded executive order that really, I think, for the first time caused a lot of consternation in Michigan. Up until Thursday, I had really heard virtually no criticism of the governor. She had been, I think, pretty widely seen as being decisive and out in front of this thing. There was obviously some of the partisan bickering with the president, but outside of that, the actual actions she was taking, I think, were widely assumed to be pretty effective and smart. Suddenly, there's been this firestorm in the last 72 hours, and it's been interesting to see. So far, there has been no adjustment. There's not even been a public comment from her on a willingness to reassess, but we'll see whether that changes in the next day or two.
It's disastrous. I think it's cost her vice presidential ambitions because it's just so dumb. And when you make it, everyone makes mistakes, especially in a pandemic that no one's ever dealt with before. And I'm very, Churchill made mistakes at the start of World War II. Everybody makes mistakes. But you can't stick with it's sunk costs, right? Tim Alberta, when you've done something dumb, you don't double down just because you invested something in it.
I think that's right in general. It's a good rule for politicians to follow and for elected officials to follow. I think, Hugh, it's a tricky situation for her, obviously, because you have this enormous, per capita, Michigan's death toll is the highest in the country, and you've got Detroit and now the surrounding suburbs of Detroit and Southeast Michigan are just really starting to get pounded here. And so I understand the sentiment to say for a couple of weeks here, we're just going to go scorched earth, no apologies to anybody. But obviously when you do that, you're going to kick up a lot of criticism, and that's what happened.
I mean, the Upper Peninsula is just so different from Wayne County. It just is crazy to me. But let me close by asking you, Tim. I think Kamala Harris is a lockdown, mortal lock to be the vice president. Too many boxes checked that other people don't check. I think Whitmer was a distant number 2 to begin with, but now the controversy makes it number 100. What do you think about the vice presidential selection?
So I'm of a different mind about it, Hugh, and of course I'm probably dead wrong because we've all been wrong and destroyed everything in the last few years. But I actually I would if I had to go to Vegas and push my chips in on somebody, it would be Klobuchar, hands down. I think Biden really values personal relationships. Biden wants somebody who thinks the way that he does. He's not looking for the balance necessarily that you would typically associate with this process. He sees in Klobuchar somebody who governs like him, who thinks like him, who has relationships that he does, who's willing to reach across the aisle. Klobuchar in the upper Midwest is able to do a lot of the same things that a Whitmer would be able to do, but the plus is that he has known Klobuchar for decades.
Yeah, but factor in the savaging effect of the virus on the African American community. I don't think we can underestimate how savage it's been on the African American community. Tim Alberta, always a pleasure. Stay safe, my friend. Talk to you next week at Tim Alberta on Twitter. Hey, America, stay safe. Adam and Ben, thanks for being there. Generalissimo will be back. Go over to HughHewitt.com to get the entire Josh Hawley interview, or go listen to it at my YouTube channel, to which you should be subscribed and watching this show anyway. YouTube.com, type in Hugh Hewitt. You'll be there, and I'll be here tomorrow on the next Hugh Hewitt Show.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you in part by Job Creators Network.